And then continued with Briardark, and now has Black-Eyed Saint. We have reviews. Both of the other books have been reviewed on the channel already. Now, as always, I like to check these out via audiobook. I generally listen to them on Audible or the Black Library app, depending on the length of the book. Depends where you can get the better cost from. These short stories generally are better to go on the Black Library app or the Black Library website to pick up for a much cheaper cost than an Audible credit. But this one is narrated by Jake Uri, who I can't say I don't think I've listened to anything narrated, but it was really enjoyable narration, really enjoyed it, so well done there. But let's get kicking on and let's talk about the story. So, as I said, Black-Eyed Saint, this picks up after the events of Briardark go down, but continues more directly on from Gothgul Hollow, where Briardark very much sort of had that side story part, and then we saw, Lord Gothgul appear in that as well. This definitely takes on the same lead role characters as we had in Gothgul Hollow. And so, the story. A girl stumbles across the moors, death hard on her heels. To her saviours, she speaks of Calignius, a smog-shrouded mining town deep in the mountains that has been gripped by a strange epidemic. Now, Runa Skuldofra and Tiberius Grimm must lead a small expedition into the haunted vales of the Bloodrock Peaks to answer the girl's pleas for aid. There, the hunter and the veteran priest of Sigmar will uncover the enigma of a forlorn-looking statue and its curious sway over the town. A place ruled by ancient fear and phobia, zealotry and madness. Separated and isolated, Runa and Tiberius will learn there are far worse fates than death, for in Calignius friendships turn sour, faith boils into anguish, and long-buried nightmares rise up from the shadows. If they are to survive, they will need to find a way to unite against the demons that strike to divide them. And so, what is this story's purpose though? Well, like I said, this takes us back to a very familiar cast of characters. We see all the characters we recognise from Gothgul Hollow, and indeed that led or arrived in the culmination of that story. We see, Edria and Lord Gothgul back in the story, obviously Runa and Tiberius, and even, secondary characters like Apothecor as well, and indeed, obviously, the vampire Genevieve. And so, I think the big purpose of this is, I think we're finally seeing the big bad properly introduced. I think there's definitely maybe some other times we've seen this big bad, but it's not really been hinted at properly. Once again though, this whole series is really taking a look at the horrors of the mortal realms, and the idea is that it's trying to show you a horror that is worse than anything the death realm can show you, which is so interesting a concept. There's wraiths and there's banshees and vampires and all this sort of stuff, but there's something scarier than them in the realm of death, which is just horrifically frightening to think about. And so, our main characters of this story are Runa and Tiberius. We met these characters first in Gothgul Hollow. Runa is a hired gun. He is pretty much now a main sort of, guardsman of Lord Arik and Edria Gothgul as well. And, has that little relationship, with Edria Gothgul. They are quite close. Tiberius Grimm is a ancient priest of Sigmar. He's an old, wise and battle-hardened soldier who's been on the fields of war his entire life. He is effectively an uncle-like character to Edria, the daughter of Lord Arik Gothgul, and seen as sort of, the wise sort of hand in this particular story. It's really interesting sort of having a look at all the sort of stuff that's happened between them. But these are the two characters we sort of follow in the majority of this story. The young sort of, faithless huntsman, mercenary, and, the zealous priest that has, a dark and shameful past. And so what changes about these characters over the course of the story? I guess this is always the part where spoilers maybe come into it. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, don't listen to this part. Maybe skip along to the next slide. But for me, this is, a really interesting story that has a lot of change and a lot of character development for both of these characters, Is these two different things. Faith is, certainly a main point within this story, but along with friendship as well. These two characters aren't sort of, friendly-ish towards each other. Like, they both are serving the same purpose. They both serve the same people in the Gothgals and all of that. But they aren't sort of like the two that you would pick to like go on a trip together and be the closest characters together. Runa is very much, just a hired gun. He has a little bit of a soft spot for Ethra Gothgal, and I think through the course of the story, his big like character development is him maybe finding his faith again. He's that person who has the, well, if Sigmar is all powerful, then why does he let bad things happen? It's really about him finding that faith again. And Tiberius is that man who has, well, maybe his faith shaken a little throughout the course of the story, and his one is, well, finding his faith again. Can he find that faith again? Is his faith shattered? Is his certainty maybe changed? How does he sort of change his worldview? He's not the same at the end of the story, and I don't think Runa is either. And so something I think the book does really well. The book definitely has a really big focus on faith, as you might have guessed in the last slide, talking about, the characters finding, losing, regaining, all that sort of stuff with faith in the book. It definitely has a major part to play with the story, and, we play over the parts of faith having the power for both good and evil in the mortal realms. It can come in all varieties and for all manner of different things, not just gods in other things in oneself, all this sort of stuff. And I think the exploration of the idea of faith as a whole is explored really nicely in this story, taken from different sort of aspects and different sort of parts of different characters, and how different characters sort of look into it, how different characters interact and find or lose it within the story is really quite interesting, and definitely sort of gives, an overall tone to the story. Faith against the darkness, against the horrors of the mortal realms, or indeed for the horrors of the mortal realms as well. And so who would like this story? I think a lot of people, have the criticism of Age of Sigmar that maybe it's a little bit too high fantasy. We definitely got this in the first few stories that came out for Age of Sigmar, like Gates of Azera and the Realm Gate Wars. And, it was really hard to sort of relate to those stories. They were at this sort of higher scale, I always sort of like the idea a friend of mine put to me, where Age of Sigmar is the fantasy that a fantasy world dreams up of. And this, to me, is a much more sort of dark, down-to-earth, or I guess you could say almost grimdark style story. I mean, there definitely are good characters within this story. Like, Runa is 100% a good guy, as is Tiberius. Like, there are good guys in this. It's not sort of, I guess, the 40k grim dark where it's all shades of grey for every character. There are good characters in this story. But I think if you're looking for that sort of story that is, more down to earth, more human focused, more sort of human against the horrors that, maybe lurk around, I think this is definitely a story that you could enjoy. You probably could pick this story up if you hadn't listened to any of the others. You might miss a few bits here and there, but I don't think you're going to miss an awful lot. I think you can probably pick up on a few of the different ideas if you had, but I would probably at least give Gothgall Hollow a listen, maybe even giving Briardark a listen as well before this. I don't think Briardark's as important, but you will miss a little bit of story in there. But definitely you want to have read Gothgall Hollow before this, but this is, a really fun, down-to-earth Age of Sigmar style story that really, is supernatural horrors against average dudes. And so, in summary, I think this is probably my favourite of the series so far. I would say this isn't probably the most horror-focused story. It's a little bit different reading horror than sort of watching a horror film. I don't get the same sort of feelings I do, but watching and reading, I get it a little bit different. I mean, maybe it's because it's not visually there for me, but I don't feel like this is as horrific as the story before, where I really sort of felt some of the parts of that story made me upset, where this maybe doesn't as much. This is definitely more suspenseful thriller style horror, I think, than the outright sort of dark style that maybe was Briardark before it. What's really cool though, is this now seems like we have a major enemy sort of put forward in the story, which I really think just makes me look forward to the next stories in this. I really enjoyed this. I think it's pretty clear this is probably my favourite in the series so far. I like that we got to see Runar more again. I think Runar is my favourite character in this set of stories. I hope, the next story we get to see more of Edria and Runar together. I think that's a character combination I want to see more of. But look forward to the next installment in the Murghast series, whoever ends up writing it. This has been really enjoyable. I always enjoyed Dale Lucas stuff from his original. I remember reading Realm Lords, and then he had Godsbane. I can't remember if it was more, but always really enjoyable for Dale Lucas. He's a really solid Age of Sigmar writer, and I think you'd enjoy any of his stuff if you picked it up. If you have checked out Black-Eyed Saint as well, if you've been reading the Murghast stories, I'd love to hear your thoughts about them down in the comments below. Let us know what you thought of them. And so that's the end of the video. We hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our fantastic little community here, we have a Discord server which is linked down in the video's description. Also linked down in the video's description are the best ways to help support the channel. If you would like to, you can do so either by YouTube members or Patreon, or by grabbing yourself some merch at Teespring or at our Ko-fi store. All of them are linked down in the video's description. As a special thank you to our Patreons and YouTube members, we'd like to give you all a shout out. So thank you to our Patreons: Christian Weir, Soren, Kenny Lowe, Outer Shot First, Andrew Bowen, The Rising Ape, Q Dynamic, JJ Austrian, Average Wargamer, Domir, Mark Harvey, James Cater, Benjamin Swallers, Redman, Iron Grinch, Nicholas Colomos, Colorblind Magic, Grimscold, and Andy C. And to our YouTube members: Greenrich Gaming, Ronya, Lock Lorick, The Johnny84, David Ellsworth, Wolfric Nick, Broken Chef, Ariana Edwards, Revenar, Pink Nico Fire, Robin Mankiller, Monty's Tabletop Terrain, John Castle, Davis Weird, James Tillman, Gargamel196, and Disco. Lastly, a special thanks first of all to Lady Witchfox Art, who does all the amazing artwork for the channel, everyone who helps come and provide the games for everyone to watch on the channel as well, and indeed all our fantastic mods and members of the community who keep our Discord and comment section a fantastic place for all to be. Thank you all once again, everyone. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey. Ciao for now.